Hi everybody. As you can see by the clock over my shoulder, it's only been a couple of minutes. I just decided to read another chapter right now. So, if we're all ready, well, let's see now. Hi to my grandchildren, Jackson, Matthew, and Marjorie, all here in Maine. Let's see, Emma in Maine, Malia and Lucas in Missouri, Kaiming and Rukai way out in Washington State, Hope here in Maine. Hi, Hope. Dylan in Maine and Lucas in Maine, Leslie and Mary, as always, over in England, Kayla in Maine, and Ezzy and Indy in Oklahoma, Sylvia, Macy, and Lillian here in Maine, Harper and Judson here in Maine. Hey, Harper, Judson. Caden and Xander here in Maine. Hi, boys. Tell your grandmother I said hi, okay? Evangeline and Isaac in Rhode Island, and Mabel in the Far East in the country of China. Hi, Mabel. And Oliver, Madeline, and Wyatt way out west. Now, chapter 17. Striped Chipmunk cuts the string. Aha. I say Striped Chipmunk has sharp teeth. Hippity hop, flippity flop. All on a summer day, my mother turned me from the house and sent me out to play. Striped Chipmunk knew perfectly well that was just nonsense, but Striped Chipmunk learned a long time ago that when you were just bubbling right over with good feeling, there is fun in saying and doing foolish things. That is just how he was feeling. So he ran along the old rail fence on one side of the long lane, saying foolish things and cutting up foolish capers just because he felt so good, and all the time seeing all that those bright little eyes of his could take in. Now Striped Chipmunk and the merry old breezes of Old Mother West Wind are great friends, very great friends indeed. Almost every morning they have a grand frolic together, but this morning the merry little breezes hadn't come over to the old stone wall where Striped Chipmunk makes his home. Anyway, they hadn't come at the usual time. Striped Chipmunk had waited a little while, and then, because he was feeling so good, he had decided to take a run down the long lane to see if anything new had happened there. That is how it happened that when one of the merry little breezes did go look for him, and was terribly anxious to ask him to come help Grandfather Frog, he was nowhere to be found. But Striped Chipmunk didn't know anything about that. He scampered along the top rails of the old fence, jumped up on top of a post, and sat up to wash his face and hands. For Striped Chipmunk is very neat and cannot bear to be the least bit dirty. He looked up and winked at old Mr. Buzzard, sailing round and round way, way up in the blue, blue sky. He chased his own tail round and round until he nearly fell off the post. He made a wry face in the direction of Redtail the Hawk, whom he could see sitting on the top of a tall tree way over on the Green Meadows. He scolded Bowser the Hound, who happened to come trotting up the long lane, and didn't stop scolding until Bowser was out of sight. Then he kicked up his heels and whistled along the old fence again. Halfway across a shaky old rail on the fence, he suddenly stopped. His bright eyes had seen something that filled him with curiosity, quite as much curiosity as Peter Rabbit would have had. It was a piece of string. Yes, sir, it was a piece of string. Now, Striped Chipmunk often had found pieces of string, so there was nothing particularly interesting in the string itself. What did interest him and make him very curious was the fact that this piece of string kept moving. Every few seconds it gave a little jerk. Who ever heard of a piece of string moving all by itself? Certainly Striped Chipmunk never had. He couldn't understand it. For a few minutes he watched it from the top rail of the old fence. Then he scurried down to the ground, and a few steps at a time, stopping to watch sharply between each little run, he drew nearer and nearer to that queer-acting string. Gave him a funny feeling inside to see a string acting like that, so he was very careful not to get too near. He looked at it from one side, then ran around and looked at it from the other side. At last he got where he could see that one end of the string was under an old board. And then he began to understand. Of course, there was somebody hiding under that old board and jerking the string. Striped Chipmunk sat down and scratched his head thoughtfully. Whoever was pulling that string couldn't be very big, or they would never have been able to crawl under that old board. Therefore, he needn't be afraid. A gleam of mischief twinkled in Striped Chipmunk's eyes. He seized the other end of... I'll start over again. He seized the other end of the string and began to pull. Such a jerking and yanking as began right away. But he held on and pulled harder. Then out from under the old board appeared the queer webbed feet of Grandfather Frog tied together. Striped Chipmunk was so surprised that he let go of the string and nearly fell over backward. "Why, Grandfather Frog, what under the sun are you doing here?" he shouted. When Striped Chipmunk let go of the string, Grandfather Frog promptly drew his feet back under the old board. But when he heard Striped Chipmunk's voice, he slowly and painfully crawled out. He told how he had been caught and tied by Farmer Brown's boy, and finally dropped near the old board. He told how terribly frightened he was, and how sore his long legs were. Striped Chipmunk didn't wait for him to finish. In a flash, he was at work with his sharp teeth and had cut the cruel string before Grandfather Frog had finished his story. "Oh, I missed something. It took place just a minute ago in our reading. There's a picture here. Striped Chipmunk pulling on the string, and you see Grandfather Frog up there under the board. Striped Chipmunk didn't know he was up there at first, but there he is pulling the string. Can everybody see it? Okay. Poor Grandfather. Boy, his legs were tied together, weren't they? Wow. Now, let me see. That was chapter 17. Striped Chipmunk gets the string. Okay. There. That's the end of that chapter. And the next chapter, when we read it, probably tomorrow, is entitled Grandfather Frog Hurries Away. I bet he did, don't you? Okay, bye everybody.